Ed Dickens. I'm the Senior Manager of Heritage Operations for Union Pacific. Well, it's a lot of people ask that question. It was built in 1944, but there's no coincidence there. We had 45 of 3 different classes of big 484 locomotives, and that was the last one, the 45th, 800 to 844. So it was the very last steam locomotive purchased by the Union Pacific in December of 1944. Well, it's special because it's a steam locomotive operating in the year 2016. But all through its history from 1960 on, it served as one of the best public relations ambassadors a railroad could ever hope to have. It was designed as a passenger locomotive. Those big 80-inch drivers, they kind of give that away for people that know about steam locomotives. But it was part of a long evolution of locomotive development. Railroads, just like today, very competitive, have to remain competitive just to be competitive in the marketplace. But the big steam locomotives were necessary to haul the big passenger trains, big heavy passenger trains. And bear in mind, back in that era, we didn't have the highway systems that we have today. Airlines were really, they were conceived, but there was no airlines. So the only way the American public could travel was by rail. So all railroads had to develop these massive locomotives to do the job, and that's what it did. In the old days, the old sayings were more powerful than a speeding locomotive. And the reason people thought that is because they're so massive and huge. But compared to a modern diesel, it's kind of like comparing apples and oranges. A steam locomotive produces its max power at a much higher speed than a diesel engine does. A diesel electric locomotive, the diesel engine is turning an electric generator, an alternator, and that produces electric power for electric motors. So it's a different form of developing horsepower. A steam locomotive is weakest when it's at its start, and depending on the size of the driver diameter, that kind of gives you an idea where its power range fits. The 844 is just getting into its power range over 60, 70 miles an hour, and that's what it was designed to do. Diesel locomotives, they're nowhere near that. Modern electric locomotives, especially in Europe and other countries, those locomotives are designed for high speed. Amtrak special geared passenger locomotives, they're more like the 844. So it's kind of like apples and oranges. Horsepower, it's right around 4,500 horsepower, approaching 5,000 depending on the circumstances. Modern diesel locomotives today are right around the 4,500 horsepower range too. But they're very technologically advanced, and they operate thousands of miles on their load of fuel, and the servicing requirements are much more user-friendly by today's standards.
Union Pacific is very proud of being able to invest in our heritage equipment, really preserving that history of America. There's no other railroad that has the heritage fleet that Union Pacific maintains, and we're very proud of that. We like to get out and put them on display, let the public come and take a look and glimpse back at history. It's just a wonderful thing that our company does, and we're very proud to be able to provide that for the U.S.
The steam locomotive was originally designed to burn coal. A lot of locomotives on the railroad, Union Pacific particularly, had vast resources of coal that they had under their control. And so the locomotives burn that fuel source. Some locomotives would go back from coal to oil. The passenger locomotives, to make it a faster turnaround and an overall cleaner operation, they were converted to oil. The 844 was converted to oil pretty early on in its life, in 1945, its first year. So it's been an oil burner its entire existence, you could say. It was designed to operate 110 miles an hour. And again, bearing in mind that we didn't have highway systems and airlines, 100 miles an hour was fast. And by today's standards, it's something we generally don't see that kind of speed unless you're on a special passenger corridor. Typical speed on a passenger train is around 79 miles an hour. But back in the steam days, if a train was late, it was the duty of the crew and all members of the railroad to keep the train on schedule and get back on schedule if you needed to. And that meant that you operated fast. It wasn't something that was considered to be against the rules or forbidden. It was actually your duty to operate the train at a safe speed to get you back on schedule. The tracks were maintained for that speed. The equipment was maintained for that speed. There are stories that I've heard retired employees tell me where they've operated the locomotive at 100 miles an hour. And a very high speed for a sustained period of time to get back on schedule. But again, it's a competitive world out there, and people are traveling, and they want to get to Grandma's house for the holidays, and the railroad was going to get them there. Well, safety's always been paramount on the railroad. All through the years, you look at old historical photographs and you see the slogans, safety first. Safety is the utmost importance. You know, all the various safety slogans. And that's the same today. The safety focus is our top priority in every aspect of every job that we do. Everything that we do, and you can imagine bringing a piece of equipment to town, the coordination and the planning that has to take place to make sure that we can accommodate the public, that we can do the dangerous work of railroading in the safest manner possible.